Good evening and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Kimon Hatza and I'm a business attorney at GrowthCounsel here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I represent life sciences and technology companies in a full array of business transactions. Tonight we're continuing our special series on life sciences, healthcare, and technology leaders in the Delaware Valley. Before we get started, I want to remind our viewers that from time to time, financial issues involving life sciences or technology companies will be discussed on the show. These discussions are not and should not be viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since the show is pre-recorded and shown at a later time, the information may no longer be current. You should always check with your financial advisor before entering into any financial transaction. I'm happy to have with me this evening as my co-host, Charlie Huntington. Charlie's the head of public relations at Life Sciences PA. Life Sciences PA is the voice of advancement for the life sciences in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Charlie, thank you for co-hosting.
Thanks, Kimon.
So I know you've got a busy agenda coming up. Personally, can you tell me what's on your schedule coming up?
Sure. I wanted to highlight two programs. One of them is a Life Sciences PA program. One is not. I'll start with their program. So on the 19th of March, down at the Pennsylvania Convention Center, they're going to have their annual dinner. And as you know, it's a big event. 1,200 plus people. Normally it spills over into a room where they've got to pipe it in with satellites. So get your reservation in early. Tables are still available, and it should be a great event. But it's one of those events where it doesn't matter if you're in transition, or if you're a service provider, if you're a CEO. Everybody comes together that night. Tends to be one of the biggest networking events in the life science community locally here. Yeah. So that's one. The other one that I want to highlight, which is not a Life Sciences PA program, but it's a Life Science Collaborative program. That one's on March 3rd. It's at the University of the Sciences from 7 a.m. until 2 p.m. The title of it is Innovators and Investors, The Journey from Entry to Exit. And it's going to have some amazing panelists. I see two of whom have been in our midst on the show before, Adele Oliva and also Steve Nappy. So promises to be a great program. Chris Cashman is also going to be on it, and he's been one of our guests here. So thanks.
Wonderful. Well, Charlie, you and I have been co-hosting this show now for, I think this is our 9th season. And up till today, we have not had a repeat guest on the show.
That's right.
But we're fortunate to have a repeat guest today, and I'm going to be introducing him momentarily. Before I do, I just want to let our viewers know that if you have a question that you would like us to answer on a future show, watch this video to learn how to do it.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
It's my great pleasure to introduce this evening our special guest, Dr. Tim Pelura. Dr. Pelura is a serial life science entrepreneur with over 40 years of experience in the life science industry and has been pivotal in the development of several new therapies spanning numerous therapeutic areas. He's currently the entrepreneur in residence at Biomotive, an investment company focused on accelerating breakthrough discoveries into medicines, and the CEO of OptiKira, a portfolio company of Biomotive, pursuing therapeutics targeting ER stress and the UPR, unfolded protein response, in several diseases, and we'll be talking about that very, very shortly. Additionally, he is a CEO of Respana Therapeutics, a startup developing therapeutics to increase influenza survival, and executive chair of Hyma Therapeutics, developing therapies for bleeding disorders and hematologic diseases. His previous positions include, among others, CEO of Surpass Inc., a preclinical CRO, Chairman, President, and CEO of Immunome, an antibody platform company, and founding CEO of Promedior, a product-focused biotech company developing novel therapeutics for the treatment of fibrotic disorders and diseases. Early in his career, he held various positions at Pharmacia, a multinational pharmaceutical company. Dr. Pelura is also pivotally involved in several nonprofit, regional, and national life sciences initiatives, and sits on the boards of several biotech organizations. He holds a PhD in chemistry from Rutgers University. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kim. It's great to be back.
Tim, what first attracted you to a career in the life sciences?
Well, to be honest, I initially didn't think of the pharma industry as a career for me. I was totally committed to going to medical school. And as is the case, often things don't follow a predictable path. I had to put myself through college, and in the process of doing that, I took on positions actually the first one was at a company called Warner Lambert up in New Jersey, and I was in the quality control division of their ethical pharma group doing analysis. I went from there to Pharmacia, and one thing led to another. I ended up being in the right place at the right time, and ended up with a number of some very nice advancements in my career at Pharmacia, which led me to the opportunity of graduate school, where Pharmacia paid for my graduate education. So I ended up going into chemistry with a focus towards pharmacy, and so that was it was a good career change for me, and I decided to let medicine avoid medical school and actually go into pharma.
So how did your early career in Big Pharma help prepare you for all the entrepreneurial roles you've had since then?
Yeah, what my time at Big Pharma was very useful in that it gave me the opportunity to understand how drug development actually works, and importantly to understand what Big Pharma is looking for in new therapeutics. Big Pharma has the skill and the capability to identify the needs in drug therapies, and kind of the mechanism for determining the value proposition for each of those new opportunities. And those skills, are critical if you want to be an entrepreneur in pharma, to be able to identify an idea, identify an opportunity that it really meets the need of a particularly serious disease, and then understanding the steps to actually get it to the patients that need it so dearly.
So continuing along that train of thought, how has your experience in so many startup life sciences companies now helped prepare you for your role as the entrepreneur in residence at Biomotive and also as the CEO of OptiKira?
Yeah. So I was actually thinking about this a little earlier. This is my 7th startup, and it's interesting because each time you move to the next one, you really are able to take what you've learned from those early failures and successes. So what do I do at Biomotive? First off, Biomotive is kind of a combination of a fund, an investment fund, and an accelerator, meaning that we have access to, as part of our relationship with the Huntington Discovery Institute, it's a $300 million fund, which the HDI, or Huntington Discovery Institute, is the nonprofit arm, which funds early research at some of the best institutions around the world. And we're the for-profit arm, Biomotive, meaning that we have access to those ideas that have been de-risked through the HDI, and we can actually pull them into the Biomotive organization and further de-risk them and bring them into the clinic and eventually partner them with Big Pharma. So I'm an entrepreneur in residence for Biomotive, and what does that mean? It means that I help establish the strategy for diversifying our portfolio to make sure that we have a portfolio that has, a certain percentage of very early stage opportunities. Maybe 50% of our opportunities have been de-risked and we're moving them into development. And then 25-30% of them are on the bubble for a deal with Big Pharma. So having been through a number of startups, I have an eye for those opportunities that I think have a better chance of success than others. So I help as an entrepreneur in residence. One of the companies at Biomotive is OptiKira, and so they've asked me to be the CEO of that company.
What is your biggest challenge as CEO of OptiKira?
Yeah, the biggest challenge with any early stage company is, and especially as a scientist, you want to do everything possible to understand the biology and the chemistry and the so forth of this particular, that's behind this company. What an entrepreneur or CEO of any life science company needs to do is to identify the key questions that need to be answered to determine whether or not this is going to make a difference in a patient's life. And then once you've made that determination, to identify the studies and hence where the dollars need to be spent to actually increase the value of this company and basically have us get the attention of Big Pharma, which will eventually take these programs and bring them to the market, and of course investors. So it's the challenge is always when you take a very difficult biological story and you have to distill it down to something that makes sense to an investor, for example. An investor who's investing to make money, not to learn biology or medicine. And so that's always a challenge with these type of companies. And with this company in particular, it's very new biology and it's complicated. But I'd be glad to explain it to you.
Tim, it's great to see you again and have you on the program. I enjoyed my time when you led BioStrategy Partners.
Yep.
And I don't know, that was 7 or 8 years of good fun.
That was.
So,
it was a lot of fun.
great to see you. And I think your travels have taken you through California and Wisconsin and Minnesota, and you've been all over since you were on the show here. Missouri?
Yeah.
Sounds like the Johnny
yeah.
Cash song, right? So, so tell us about OptiKira.
So OptiKira is we have a platform, a technology platform, which addresses what's called the unfolded protein response. Okay, what is that in very simple terms? If you think about it, every one of the cells in our body are like small manufacturing facilities, and they're taking in fuel from our food and from oxygen and so forth, and they're producing all types of proteins and hormones and all different types of compounds that we need for our body to work. The unfolded protein response is kind of like the quality control system for our cells. As our cells make these proteins, it's able to sense if a protein's not made the way it's supposed to be. It might tear it up, it might send it back for reprocessing, or it may ship it out of the cell. And this is a natural thing that happens every second within our body, okay, in every cell in our body. Under disease conditions, where our body's under stress, that housekeeping function of the UPR is overcome. And what happens, it eventually leads to the death of the cell. So for example, a good example that's involved in the UPR is diabetes.
Remind me again what UPR is.
The unfolded protein response.
Thank you.
Okay.
I know you had mentioned that earlier, Kimon, and you did
so,
too.
for example, in diabetes, every second the cells in our pancreas that make insulin are making 1 million copies of insulin every second, okay? And only 20% of that insulin is actually correctly produced. So the cells are already under stress to continue to work on insulin to make it correctly. Now, if you then put on top of this either type 1 or type 2 diabetes, where you either have, you're calling for more insulin, that puts more stress on the system, and eventually those islet cells will die. We're going after a disease called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which there's a cell in our lung that is responsible for certain proteins that if that cell dies, then you start this whole process of fibrosis in the lung, which eventually leads to a lung that's not able to function. And so that's our first area that we're going after.
Okay. Do you want to talk about any other areas of focus, or we'll stick to that one for today?
No, I think that's probably the one. That's our initial clinical indication that we're going after.
So how about IP, intellectual property?
Yep. So we have a great intellectual property portfolio. The core of it came from UCSF. From our founders. We have additional IP that we've generated internally at OptiKira, and we've also gone out and licensed other IP to help us put if you will, a picket fence around the company in terms of intellectual property and our ability to operate.
In what stage of development is the company's technology?
So we're very close to nominating our first clinical candidate. And what does that mean? That means that we've done enough studies to show that this compound is ready for the clinic, and we start our IND enabling studies, which means we do all the toxicity testing, all the chemical testing, the scale up at the manufacturing level to get us to the point where we can start studies in human beings. Okay. And that will likely be first quarter of next year we'll be in the clinic.
Okay. And then where will you need, along the line, you'll need FDA approval. Where will you need approval before you can commercialize your initial product? Where does that, what point
yeah, well,
does that
that's going to
happen?
be, that'll be several years.
Yeah.
I mean, it will take us about 5 years to get through clinical studies, and then we submit an NDA, and hopefully the NDA is complete enough that we get approval to market.
Okay. Do you anticipate other uses for your technology?
Yeah, as you can imagine, how I described the unfolded protein response, it's involved in every single cell of our body. And so there are applications, as I mentioned, diabetes and fibrosis, both in the lung and in the liver. There's a disease called NASH in the liver, which is a significant problem that we're pursuing. I mentioned diabetes, oncology, cancer. There are a number of approaches that can be taken using this unfolded protein response therapy, as well as ocular diseases, retinal diseases, hence the name OptiKira, and also neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Why did we choose IPF? Because we felt that we had the best chance of getting an early proof of principle to prove that this mechanism in our body is indeed important to disease.
Okay.
So.
All right. And how, we've mentioned you have been well traveled since we last saw you. How important is the Philadelphia region to what you're doing with OptiKira?
Yeah, I mean, Philadelphia, it's interesting since when we first met. Philadelphia has really come a long way since I first moved back to Philly in 1999.
That's from San Diego, that's
from
where
San
you were.
Diego, and I think I remember telling you that I was kind of in culture shock coming back home.
Everything was siloed, right?
Yes.
That was
Yes, very much so. And but a number of things have conspired to the advantage of the life science industry. I think the contraction of the industry, the fact that we have Silicon Valley in our backyard,
right,
with in Philly for cell therapies, and some really big hits with CAR T therapies and things like that, has brought the attention to the city. We've always had a great workforce, and my first company in Philly, startup, I had problems finding people that had the ability to put on multiple hats and to operate in an entrepreneurial environment, but that is changing. I think people realize that Big Pharma is not what it used to be, and they needed to change and develop new skills. So workforce is easy. Still the remaining challenge is access to capital. And even though it's easy for us, we can raise money outside of Philly, I think the region could do so much better if we had a couple tier one VCs that were, on Market Street. And, but that will happen as we have more successes. VCs don't like to travel. So if we start to see success after success from Philly, we'll start to get the big ones like NEA and OrbiMed and those type of firms put offices in Philly.
Thanks, Tim.
Tim, how are you addressing your current funding needs, I guess currently and then in the near term?
Yeah. So we're about ready to close our seed round, which has gotten us to this point of nominating a clinical candidate. We're preparing now for a Series A round, which we hope to close third quarter of this year. The fortunate thing with OptiKira is investors as well as strategic partners understand the significance of this pathway, the disease pathway, and they want it. So we've had a lot of attention. So I think we're in a good position.
Do you have a lot of competitors in the industry now, or?
So there was one company that, well, first off, competitors in the field of the diseases that we're in. Yes, there are competitors. There are two companies that have drugs on the market for IPF, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, but they're not meeting the need of the disease. They don't extend the lifetime of these patients. They make it a little bit easier on them to survive or to live their daily lives. So we do have competition. However, none of them are addressing the fundamental problem of the disease, which is protecting these cells that start the whole process of the disease. And so hence we've gotten a lot of interest from big companies and investors. With regard to the biology, there was one other company out there that was working in this field, and they've recently went under. This was a company called Quintus out of New York. They had a storied group in their management team. It was science that came out of Laurie Glimcher's lab at Cornell, who's now the CEO of Dana-Farber, so big names. But they ended up with investors that had kind of a very short-sighted view, and they lost patience, and so they decided to close the company. So we're the one leading the charge at this point.
What would success look like for OptiKira?
Ultimately, the success would be that we bring products to the market for patients that really have no other viable choices. For OptiKira, financially, it will most likely be that we partner this with a large company, and that company will take it through the paces to get it to the market.
Okay.
Tim, so OptiKira was founded by two MD, PhDs, and two chemists at the University of California, San Francisco. And OptiKira's technology was licensed from that university. Can you discuss the program at UCSF that helped spawn your technology and provide support, or talk about the support that's provided by UCSF for OptiKira, please?
Sure. So very gifted scientist at UCSF. Feroz Papa, MD, PhD, his specialty is this particular biological pathway, but a focus in diabetes. Scott Oakes, another MD, PhD, he's actually an oncology-focused pathologist, so his focus has been on the role of this mechanism in oncology. And then Dusty Maley and Brad Bax are chemists that were able to develop tool drugs to test this hypothesis early on. they are the perfect founders in that I call them up and say, I need you on the phone with a potential investor or a potential partner, and they clear the calendar. They're sharp people, and I'm very happy that we have the opportunity to meet with them, to work with them. You know, we talked earlier about the name of the company, OptiKira. It's indicating an ocular indication, because when they started this work, there was so little known about this pathway that the only disease model, was in the eye. So even though they had interest well beyond the eye, they thought the initial effort would be in the eye, and that's where the initial data was generated, which started the company. And it was looking at a therapy for retinitis pigmentosa, which is a genetic disease that eventually leaves kids blind. And so we have an ongoing program that's funded by the NIH.
So how important is the relationship between the CEO and the founders of a new company like OptiKira?
It's make or break. And in fact, the few times that I've gone out to start a company from scratch and work with founders, one of the first things, I have to determine whether or not the science behind the idea is sound. And then immediately, second place is, can I work with this founder?
You like them? Yeah.
And I think you know some of the founders of my previous companies, and that's a very important thing. You know, Scott Desane with Immunome, Richard Gomer at Promedior, which Promedior was recently bought by Roche for $1.5 billion. So
wow.
So it was. In order to be successful, you have to have a team that knows how to work together.
Scott is one of the funniest scientists I've ever met. And people would not, you know, funny and science doesn't necessarily go together in the same sentence, but
MD, PhD.
unbelievable.
Yeah, he's smart and hilarious.
That's great. That's great.
I know our time is getting short, but if I wanted to ask you just quickly, if you could talk to our viewers a little bit about the biggest challenges for the greater Philadelphia area in terms of sustaining a vibrant life sciences community.
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge, and I think we'll overcome this, is financing, bringing the VCs to Philly. They can't avoid seeing the great work that's coming out of Philly. Look what we have here. We have all the Big Pharma in our backyard. We have some of the best research institutions in the area. We have all the support organizations. Life Science PA is very, very supportive. We have great law firms that are supporting life science companies, financial companies. So it's
inevitable.
And like I said, we just need to continue our track record, get a couple more big wins, and then we'll see them, hang out their shingle.
Well, believe it or not, we're out of time. I want to thank our special guest, Dr. Tim Pelura. Tim, thank you so much. It was great having you.
Great.
Charlie, thank you for co-hosting.
Sure.
The next guest on Money Matters TV will be Edward Sullivan, CEO and founder of Trust Exchange. Thanks for watching this evening, and we'll see you again next time.